الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى لا سيما النبي المجتبى الأمين المصطفى وعلى صحابته الكرام وآل بيته العظام المستكملين الشرف أما بعد. طيب, continue where we left off in our study of Fiqh Seerah. I want everyone to pay attention with what's about to come. We're going to complete the fawaid, we're going to complete the benefits of the last thing we talked about. Connection is bad? Yeah, 1 second. Type now. Better. Type completing the benefits of the last thing we talked about. The last thing we mentioned was the fact that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a shepherd, just like all of the prophets alayhi salam. We left off on kind of we was flowing through some benefits and then we kind of cut off. So I want everyone to follow with me where we got to, and you find this is for those of you who do a lot of reading, sometimes it's an issue where you read from a beginning point and the author tends to flow with his speech until he gets to somewhere, and if he was to be asked what did he start with, you wouldn't know. Fine, so bear with me. We mentioned that from the benefits of the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was a shepherd is that he mentioned this himself, the fact that he said it. Fine, and we mentioned to make this clear why this shows us his modesty. The benefit of this is that it shows us his modesty ﷺ. But what makes it clear to us how much this brings out the modesty of the Prophet ﷺ? We mentioned an example, and the example we mentioned is that some of us in ourselves, in our own lives, someone might find it difficult, you find others might find it difficult to mention such about themselves, to mention their earlier days, to mention their weaker days. Excellent. After mentioning this, fine, we went off a bit and we said that the fact that someone might find it difficult to mention these things, fine, we mentioned that from the traps of the shaitan is that sometimes the reason this happens is because he makes it seem to a person that if they do so, this is a sign of weakness, that if they do so, it's not from what they call a strong identity or a strong character or a strong personality. Fine? So this is the benefit that we now come to from the beginning where we began with what? The fact that the Prophet ﷺ was a shepherd. So it's well known, and we mentioned examples of that. We mentioned examples of the way, just as Allah Azza wa Jalla says, زُيِّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُم, that shaitan beautifies to them their actions. He beautifies to mankind certain things. From that is that he changes the meaning in the perception of the one doing it or seeing it or hearing it. He changes the meaning of a certain word. Right? Now we mentioned many examples of this, or a couple examples to do with this. Fine, and the final kind of ending that we got from this was that what was that Islam, the legislation of Islam, Allah Azza wa Jal is not interested in what we call things. He's not interested in names. He's not. We can paint a beautiful picture. Fine, Allah Azza wa Jal is interested in the reality of things. He's interested in the reality. He's interested in the intentions of things. Is everyone with me? And so we mentioned that oppression, no matter what you call it, oppression is always oppression, whether you call it self-defense or other than that, it's oppression. Likewise, bigotry and boastfulness and looking down on others. In Islam, we call that kibr. We call that a blameworthy pride. Fine, regardless of what a person, how a person tries to justify it to themselves, then that's always pride. Fine, is everyone with me up to here? Fine. Just to end this point, I want us to learn a principle. And it kind of summarizes the last couple of things that we said about shaitan beautifying things, about terminology being changed or the perception of it being understood in a certain way. The principle is what? Is that the scholars say al-ibra, the point in regard to matters, fine, that which we take in regard to matters is bil-maqasid wal-ma'ani laysat bil-alfaz wal-mabani. That the point of things is what? In regard to Islam, that which we look at is what? The intentions and the meanings and the realities. And it's not the words, fine, and the way it looks. That's the principle. The principle is that what's important is intention and reality, and not the phrases used or the way something's made to seem. Is everyone with me? That's the principle. Fine. And why are we mentioning this principle? We're mentioning this principle, why? Because it's an evidence of what we said. It's an evidence of what we mentioned, which is that Islam, the Sharia of Islam, Allah Azza wa Jal, is not concerned with what? How beautified something may seem. Fine? What something is called. Allah is concerned with what? The reality of something. And I'll mention an example or a couple of examples to do with this. The first example is, they call it an-nikah tahallul. The first example we're going to take is a certain type of wedding contract that's done. And it's forbidden in Islam. Fine? Type. When a person divorces his wife 3 times, we're all aware of kind of divorce rulings in Islam. When a man divorces his wife 3 times, and then she comes off her waiting period, can he marry that woman again? That's a question if anyone can answer. Can he now remarry that same woman? Does anyone know the answer to this question? A man now divorces his wife once, he divorces his wife twice, he divorces his wife a 3rd time, fine, and she's gone through her entire waiting period, fine, and he hasn't taken her back. After her waiting period ends, she's now fully divorced, fine. At the end of the third divorce, fine, can he now remarry her? Mumtaz, excellent. He can't remarry her until what? حتى تنكح زوجا غيره, until she remarries. The ruling in Islam is that when a person divorces his wife 3 times, fine, they've gone through that process of divorce 3 entire times, and he hasn't taken her back after that 3rd time, then this is what they call a complete divorce. He's completely separated from her. He can't remarry her until what? She has to remarry someone, a full intended nikah, and then if he divorces her, then the first person she was married to, who gave her 3 divorces, then he can reapproach her for marriage and go through that whole process again. The aqd and the mahar and all of that again. Is everyone with me? Fine. So what we have here is, this is the rule. This is the only way he can remarry her again. Right. So what do some people do now? What some people are going to do is what? They will agree with someone, fine, whatever their terms of agreement are, they will agree with someone, fine, a person who wants to remarry his wife without going through this, for whatever reason, he will agree with someone and say to that person, okay, you marry my wife. You marry my wife, fine, and do whatever you have to do, and then divorce her. Because when you do that, what can I do? What can he do after that? He can remarry her, Mumtaz, fine. So he's gonna do such, which is allowed in Islam. What we said, the first bit of, if she the key point is what? Is if she remarries someone intentionally, with the intention of marriage, fine, which is to be together lil-abad, forever, fine, that's the intention of marriage, fine. And then it so happens that he then divorces her, then the first one can marry her. The issue here is what? He's agreed. The person that he's bringing, that he agreed with, he's not marrying her for the intention of what we just said, lil-abad, forever, or to be with her, or to, is everyone with me? Rather, he's marrying her what? For the sake of the first person. Fine? And they call this in Islam a guise, trickery, a plot. Fine? Playing around with the rules in order to get where we want to get to. Fine? In the picture, when you look at the picture of things, bear in mind, what are we trying to give an example of? How Allah He doesn't care about how it looks. Allah Azza wa Jal does not care about how things look in terms of their picture, the layout of things. He cares about the reality of them, the intentions. Fine? When you look at things on a picture basis, when you, just in front of us, you have a man who is married and he then divorced his wife 3 times. What happened? His wife remarried and they done the whole ceremony and everything, the contract, and then he divorced her. The the new marriage ended. When you look at things on paper, it's permissible for the first husband to come back and marry her. Is everyone with me? On paper. On paper. Fine. But what's the ruling of this marriage in Islam? What's the ruling of this marriage that just happened in Islam? The ruling of this marriage is that it's not valid. The marriage, the marriage, even though on paper it looks correct, fine, the marriage is not valid. The marriage is not valid. It's obligatory for them to split, and rather, that man and that woman, it's impermissible for them to ever be married again until the Day of Judgment. Until the Day of Judgment. Why? Because they tried to play games. Because they tried to twist and turn, fine, and find any route they can to get to where they want to get to. Is everyone with me? So this is the first example of what? How Islam does not care about how things look apparently, rather what's important is the reality. And the reality here is that the second person didn't want to actually marry this woman, and the first, second, and whoever agreed on these terms, they all plotted, fine, in order to just get their end result. Is everyone with me? Everyone understand the example? Fine. If there's any questions about the example, let me know now so that we can quickly go over it. Any questions? Type. We'll go on to the next example. If anyone has questions, let me type. The second example I'm going to give is what? Is of interest. The example of interest. So buying and selling is permissible. We all know buying and selling is permissible in Islam, fine? But you have someone now who comes and he says to his friend, or he says to whoever, fine, I'll buy your car off you. Fine. I'll buy your car off you in installments. I'll buy your car off you in installments. Everyone follow me on this one. He wants to buy his car off him in installments. For example, he says, I agree to buy your car for 100 grand. For example, 100,000 pounds. I'll buy your car off you, but in installments. I'll pay you this much a month until I get to 100,000. Is everyone with me? As soon as he gets the car, he sells it back to the person he bought it from. For how much? For 90,000. So he's agreed to buy his car. So there's two contracts here. The first contract is I agree to buy your car for 100,000 pounds in installments. For example, £1,000 a month I'll pay back. Fine. As soon as he gets the car, he says, I'll sell it back to you, the same person, for how much? For 90,000. For 90,000 pounds. Fine. It looks as if two contracts have happened. One contract of someone who's brought a car in installments. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. No issue. You can buy a car in installments. And the second contract is what? Someone has sold their car for a price that they desire. No issue. But what's the ruling on this transaction here? This transaction is rejected within Islam. Why? Ignore what it looks like. It looks like a car on installments, and it looks like a sale of a car. In reality, what is it? In reality, the first person has attained 90,000 pounds cash on the basis that he's going to pay back £1,000 a month until it reaches how much? 100,000 pounds. So what's he actually done? Has he actually brought and sold a car, or has he actually took a loan, an interest-based loan? Which one has he done? Is everyone with me? Is the example a bit tricky? Tamam? The apparent picture of things is that he's bought a car in installments and then he sold it back to the person for less. But if you take away all the words and the contracts and whatnot and what it looks like, the end result, what's actually happened is he's got £90,000 cash. Fine. And he's gonna now pay back £100,000, fine, in installments. What's that? What do you think that comes under? That comes under riba. That comes under interest. That's the ayn, is the essence of interest. You give me £10, you ask £20 back. That's interest. Fine. وَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. Fine. And the principle is that any loan which carries a benefit, is riba. Is everyone with me? Any loan which carries some form of exterior benefit, this is forbidden. This comes under riba. Is everyone with me? Fine. Those two examples that I've just given us, is there any trouble understanding that? Mumtaz. So these are some examples, and there's many more examples that a person can give of how the picture and the phrases we use, Islam doesn't really care about that. Fine. What's important is what our intention. What's important is what the reality of the matters. Fine. And wallahi, you can find, just as we said, زُيِّنَ لَهُمْ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُم. Shaitan can beautify the worst of things to a person. The worst of things to a person. Fine. You can find drug dealers who can make it sound like they're doing charity work. Is everyone with me? فَاللَّهُ مُسْتَعَانٍ. طيب. The next benefit, and inshallah the final benefit that we end on in regard to the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was a shepherd is what? Is that in the fact that he was a shepherd ﷺ, and the fact that he would what? Work. He would work. And he would rely on what? He would rely on his work, his earnings, fine, for himself. Right? And with this specifically, especially to do with, for example, those involved in da'wah, those involved in teaching and spreading Islam and things like this, this is extremely important to understand, that a person relies upon himself to his utmost ability. To his utmost ability. He doesn't connect himself to that which is within the people's hands in terms of his own living, his own rizq, and his own sustenance. Is everyone with me? And there's many reasons for this. From the reasons of this is that if a person relies on someone else now for his own income, and he's supposed to be someone who calls to the truth and warns from falsehood, fine, it can influence him. That person now has an influence him. He has a hand over him, and this can influence him and cause him to what? Lean towards certain opinions in that which he says. Allah musta'an. And so it might even prevent a person from speaking the truth when necessary. So it's a huge fitna. And another angle to come at it is what? That a person now, from him calling people to certain principles, to certain etiquette, certain akhlaq, a person now warns a person from, for example, becoming immersed in the dunya, fine, and to lessen from his immersion within such, yet he himself is what? He's asking for handouts. Is everyone with me? And likewise, from the benefits is that, or from the reasons is, or the wisdoms is that a person isn't necessarily gonna accept an admonishment from someone who what? Someone who they have a hand over. And this is one of the reasons we advise that if someone wants to advise a family member, especially young brothers, so sometimes it's better that they get an older person to do it. Especially when advising one's own parents, for example. Very, very difficult. It's much easier that it comes from what? An uncle or an auntie or an elder. They're more likely to accept the advice. Is everyone with me? And for this reason, the source of all of the Prophet's income, fine, has never been, for example, the kuffar. They've never relied on, for example, the kuffar for their income. Rather, they would rely on themselves. Fine, and it comes in a narration even that the Prophet ﷺ was asked, what income is best? Ayyul kasb atyab. Fine, and he said what? He said, Amal al-rajul biyadi. He said that a man work with his own hand, even though the narration has some ikhtilaf in regard to it. Al-Hakim mentions in his Mustadrak. Al-Muhim, it's mentioned in some narrations that the Prophet ﷺ said that which income is best, which rizq is best. He said that which a man earns with his own hands. Is everyone with me? Rather, the Prophet ﷺ said, he said, by the one in whom my soul is in his hands, fine, it would be best, famous narration, it would be best that what? One of you goes and he chops firewood, he gathers wood, on his back, fine, that would be better for him than for him to go to a person and ask him for money. Fine? Because why? And he mentions at the end of the narration that if he goes to the person and asks him for money, that he's now reliant upon that man. That second person can choose to give to him, or he can choose to prohibit him from such. So he's completely reliant in terms of now his risk on that person. And so the Prophet ﷺ tells us that it would be better for a man to what? Go and gather firewood, fine, for himself with his bare hands, than do such. Rather, in the hadith of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, famous hadith, is to do with inheritance. Fine. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was a very wealthy man. He came to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Ana dhu mal." He said, "I'm a wealthy man." And he said, "There's no one that's going to inherit from me illa banatun wahida." There's no one that's going to inherit from me except one daughter. And so what did he say? He said, أَفَتَصَدَّقُ بِثُلُثَيْ مَالِي. He said, should I give charity with 2/3 of my money? Fine. He asked the Prophet ﷺ, based upon him being wealthy, and a third being, in his opinion, enough for his daughter. He said, should I now give charity with the other 2/3 of my money? Fine. And the Prophet ﷺ said, La. No. He said, okay, shatri, half of it. The Prophet said, no. Fine. He said, okay, a third of it. And the Prophet ﷺ said, الثلث والثلث كثير. He said a third, and a third is plenty to give charity in. That's to do with inheritance. And the point is, after this, what did the Prophet ﷺ say? He said, أن تذر ورثتك أغنياء خير من أن تذرهم عالة يتكففون الناس. And the hadith is in both Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. He said towards the end of this hadith what? He said that for you to leave those who are going to inherit from you, your family, your relatives, for you to leave them rich is better than for you to leave them having to ask from people. Fine? Being reliant upon people. Fine? And likewise in the hadith, well known, and we're all inshallah aware of it, اليد العليا خير من اليد السفلى. That the upper hand is better than is better or more virtuous than the lower hand. Fine? So this is very, very important that a person strive to earn his rizq, his sustenance, to his utmost ability with his by himself. And from the issues that we see today is and we mentioned that there's issues with regard to this movement before, is the whole idea of red pill, the whole idea of striving in abundance for the dunya and to be a certain type of way, to be a certain type of figure. Find how to become a wealthy man, a rich man, not to work for somebody else. Find to work for yourself. And it's good to work for yourself. What I mean by this is being completely independent and making huge amounts of money, and the rest of that which comes with the whole red pill movement and the alpha male and this and that. Fine? And in reality, this is a musibah. This type of movement has huge issues. Islam, na'am, as we just took, Islam guides a person and allows a person to be wealthy, no problem. It allows a person to be wealthy. وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. And don't forget your share from the dunya. La bats. There's no issue with this. Fine? But he said, nasibaka min ad-dunya. That you have a nasib in the dunya, but you have a nasib in what? In other things as well. So Islam is what? We don't take one part of Islam and one permission of Islam and then just go with it. Fine? Islam guides a person. Islam also restricts a person and tells a person how to navigate. Fine? Everything has its proportion. Everything has its station. Fine? And so Islam says, yeah, there's no problem with wealth. And from the Sahaba, those who were wealthy, from even some of the scholars, they were wealthy. Fine? But that's not the sole purpose, just to seek that wealth. Rather, look to what those companions did with their money, and look to what those scholars did with their money. Fine? And from another angle, working for someone else is not looked down upon. The concept of working for someone else is not looked down upon at all, in any way, shape or form. Fine? Rather, how many from the scholars of Islam, the great scholars of Islam, worked for other people, made money due to other people? How many of the scholars of Islam weren't rich? Is everyone with me? And as we said, from those who were rich, for example, Ibn Mubarak and others, what did they do with their money? Fine. And as we know, الوسائل لها حكم المقاصد. That earning money, rizq, is a means. Earning money, earning sustenance, working is a means. And we know in Islam, the means take the ruling of their goals. The means take the ruling of their goals. So obviously everything has to be put into perspective. Everything has to be put into perspective. Islam is a complete system of life. It's a complete system of life. The second that a person take a part of it and leave a part of it, then everything falls apart. Fine? You take Islam as a whole. ادخلوا في السلم كافة. So just like Islam teaches you to work, teaches you the virtue of making your own money, fine? Teaches you the virtue of not having to rely upon someone else, it also teaches you how to use your money. Fine? How to use your money. For example, it restricts you in terms of not wasting money. Fine? In overly splendorous things. Fine? It teaches you what mu'amalat, what transactions are allowed, what transactions aren't. And so sadly you find in our time people are kind of pushing this idea, or an Islamified version of this idea. Fine? And they push it with what? You have pictures in the background, you have pictures of what? Luxurious items and hotels and cars and this and that, and Allah musta'an. Allah musta'an. We're in a time, the time that we live in is a time where what? We need zuhd more than we need wealth. Fine? In the early times, the scholars were offering books of what? Kitabu Zuhd. Books on asceticism. Fine? How to kind of come away from the dunya a bit and not go so too much towards it. And from the fitness that we're going to face is what? Al-wahan, towards the end of time. Hubb dunya. Fine? And so what we need in our time is what? Guidance in order to direct our money to that which benefits us, and to earn our money in halal, fine, and beneficial ways. What we need in our time is to increase in what? Our tawakkul. And obviously tawakkul is connected to rizq. Fine? For those who have less or those who have more. What we need in our time is what? To learn economizing in all of our affairs. Not going to an extreme right and not going to an extreme left. And rather, I haven't come across any of the scholars of the past, and likewise any of the well-known scholars of today that kind of push this kind of image that's being pushed. Is that what I mean? So the person who comes with these type of things, I personally believe a person has to have fiqh in the deen. Fiqh in the deen, Allah musta'an. And from the benefits of that which we're studying now, fiqh Seerah, and when a person looks at an overall picture of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and likewise of course the life of the companions and other than them, they understand what? That when you now see these programs, you see these courses, you see these people advertise this or advertise that, you automatically know what? Straight away you know that there's something wrong here. You know that there's something missing. Because what they're advertising in that program, why does it not add up with what I studied in the Seerah? Is everyone with me? There's a huge portion missing. So far what we've talked about is what? We've talked about akhlaq, we've talked about self-reliance, we've talked about many things, fine? And if you weigh it up, it doesn't fully match. Fine? So by studying these type of things, a person understands and kind of differentiates between that which there is good in, fine, and that which what may not be so beneficial for us to delve into. Fine? So a person now distances himself from those affairs. We'll leave it there with regard to the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was a shepherd and the way he earned his income, etc. And we want to move on and see how much we can take of the story of Buhayra. The story of Buhayra, the monk. Is everyone with me? And we're all probably aware of this story. To summarize the story, the Prophet ﷺ, when he turned 12 years old, and that's generally it's mentioned he was 12, some people mention otherwise, generally, and it's mentioned he was 12, he went with Abu Talib where? To Sham. He went with Abu Talib to an area called Sham, which is kind of the Syria and that type of region, fine? Because Abu Talib would go there for business, and so he would always be with him, he would accompany him. Fine? And the hadith is mentioned in many places. It's mentioned in As-Sunan at-Tirmidhi, fine? And we mentioned that's generally the third book after Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari. In a narration of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. Fine, this is where the narration is mentioned, or one of the well-known places that is mentioned. Fine, when they've gone to now do this business, someone's come out, they've stopped off somewhere, and a monk has come out. A monk has come out, and they used to go, so obviously this was a trade route they used to go down, right? And this never happened before. But this time they've stopped, and the monk has come out to them. And it's narrated that he took the hand of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what did he say? He said, هذا سيد العالمين. He said, this is the master of mankind. هذا رسول رب العالمين. This is a messenger of the Lord of the worlds. Allah sends him as a mercy to mankind. Fine. And when he was asked, what gave you such knowledge? How did you come to learn of such? He replied that there was, when you came this way, there was no stone or no tree except that it prostrated. And he said that these things, the stones and the trees, they don't prostrate except for a prophet. And he said, verily I know of the coming of such a prophet. I know and I'm aware of such a prophet due to the khatam and nubuwwah, the seal of the prophets that's below his, and he showed the area. Is everyone with me? Fine. And likewise, when they went to rest under a tree, to get shade, the monk mentioned to them, look at the shade of the tree, it's leaning towards him. Fine. After this happened, what happened? The monk now warned them from going to Rome. He warned them from going to Rome, the area of Rome. Why? Because the Jews are there. Fine, the Yahud are there. And he mentioned that if you go there, then they're going to know that this is a prophet due to his descriptions, because he fits the description. Just as he recognized them, they'll recognize him. And what will they do? They'll try to harm him, they'll try to kill him. Fine? So he warned them from this in fear of what the Yahud would do, and the Jews were known for this. From the despicable nature of the Yahud is that it's known that they were those who would harm prophets and kill prophets. Fine? And so it's mentioned that the Abu Talib sent the Prophet ﷺ back. So he carried on and sent the Prophet ﷺ back with some people. Fine? In some narrations it's mentioned that he sent them back with Bilal and Abu Bakr. However, this Ibn al-Qayyim mentions that this is a huge mistake. Fine? That it couldn't have been the case that it was Bilal and Abu Bakr that he sent them back with. What's important is that he sent them back. Fine? That's generally what happened. That's generally the story of Buhayra the monk. Very important. Now pay attention. Now this event and this story, I would have preferred that we didn't mention it in such detail. Yani the reason we mentioned this story in this place that we are is because we're going along the sequence of the book. The sequence of the book is done in the Fiqh Seerah, and the author brought it. Fine? And so for this reason we're mentioning it. However, this story in its totality, there is huge difference regarding its authenticity amongst the scholars of Islam. Even though it's a well-known story, many of us have probably heard it, there's a huge difference of opinion in regard to its authenticity, even though many scholars of hadith and otherwise have mentioned it. Fine? Whether it be Al-Hakim, whether it be As-Suyuti, strengthened it, Ibn Sa'ad mentioned it in his Tabaqat. There's many scholars that have mentioned it. Even Shaykh Al-Albani has a lot of speech regarding this, and he authenticates it. So Shaykh Al-Albani is someone who he says it's Hasan or Sahih from what I can remember in one of the Majallat. So even Tirmidhi, the narration that we just mentioned, he says Hasan Gharib. So it's not necessarily the strongest of stories. Very importantly, even the name of the monk Buhayra is not established in any authentic narrations that his name was Buhayra. Rather, it's mentioned in some narrations that his name was Jirjis. Fine. So there's even those who, if we say that it's Hasan, for example, the name of the monk isn't confirmed. Fine. Those narrations that people do say are Hasan, it's just mentioned that he was a monk. It's not mentioned his name. Fine. I would have preferred, and many authors prefer to skip this story. My personal opinion, that I would have preferred that it be left, because the benefits that we take from it can be taken from the story of what? Waraqah ibn Nawfal. Fine? Because the benefits that we take are the similar benefits that we can take. Fine. So I would have preferred to leave this and just mention that. And even the benefits that we will mention for this story, I want everyone to remember them and hold on to them, because when we get to the mentioning of Waraqa ibn Nawfal, which was also someone from the people of the book, then I'm not going to mention them in depth, because there will be some of the same benefits. I'm only going to mention the new benefits. Fine. So now, personally, that's my opinion. There's but as I said, it's a difference of opinion. There's many scholars, historians, hadith scholars, and like I said, Shaykh al-Albani, a mountain of knowledge, who say that the story it has a basis and it has a truth. Fine. But especially some things, for example, we're not going to get too much detail in regards to, for example, the trees and the stones prostrating, or the shadow moving and things like this. So now we're going to leave it there, and we're going to have to take the benefits connected to this in next lesson. So we're going to leave it there, inshallah ta'ala. The link has just cut off, Allah musta'an. We're going to leave it there, and we'll continue with the benefits next lesson, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Of course, the link's cut off, so if there's any questions from this video, just send me a message, and inshallah ta'ala, I will try my best to respond. And we'll leave it there, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. جزاكم الله خيرا.